There you go.
Okay. So today is February 5th is the DEI Advisory Committee. We'll start with attendance, go around the room and say who's here. Rob, we'll start with
Yep,
you.
Rob Mezzanotte, Assistant Superintendent.
Sally Davidson, Equity, Belonging, and Community Engagement Coordinator.
Erin Earl, School Committee Chair.
May Losi, parent.
Jen Lima, School Committee Member.
Mary Laura Presky, Parent Advocate.
Will Moss, Jr. at NK High School.
Okay, awesome. So I'm trying to pull up the agenda, bear with me. I think, did everybody have a chance to review the minutes from the last meeting?
Make a motion to approve.
Just saw the agenda.
It's linked into the agenda.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's
I
okay.
was like, oh,
We can give Mary a second.
Mhm.
sorry.
No worries.
It was 2007.
That's what it was, 2007.
So-
That way they
Yep.
can have.
Mhm. Yeah, it was.
Do you want to take a look at them real quick, Mary?
I'll find me what it is. They're not the part. I just have.
What's that? Right there. Click. Yep. No.
Oh, right here.
Yeah, right there.
Okay,
Yep.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Yes, Google.
Most meetings, Mary, I am fighting with Google, so don't worry.
Okay.
Okay. Does somebody want to make a motion to approve?
So moved. Yep, yep.
Second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so, the first thing that I wanted to go over was, William, I'm gonna turn it over to you. How are you progressing with your questions?
So we're just waiting for, sorry,
No
we're
worries.
just waiting for, student union, which Mezzanotte did leave some comments that, I might have forgotten to get to, but
Okay.
I had to get to those, but, yeah, we're just really waiting for the student union. And then we should be pretty much all set at that point.
Do you have a date set with them?
Yep.
Yeah, was
It's
that
February-
fit?
It's next week.
Okay.
Okay,
Let me just double check.
Great.
Yeah, Student Union, February 12th.
okay.
So you're not late yet, you're fine.
Yeah, you're good.
And so you're gonna present the questions to them? Or,
Yeah.
yes, okay. And then you're gonna bring back information to us so that we can
February
move
12th.
forward with the actual survey? Is that the plan?
Yes.
Yes, okay, awesome. Do you need any help or anything, or are you good?
I think I'm good so far. I just need to get to some of the suggestions from Mr. Mezzanotte, and then
Okay.
we'll be perfectly good.
Okay,
Yes.
awesome. Rob, thanks for doing
Yeah,
that.
absolutely. And
Yes,
William, if
thank
you have
you.
any, yeah, no problem. If you have any, whatever you think, if you wanna just email me back, we
Alright.
can work
Yeah.
on that, okay? So just to clarify, so we're gonna go to the student union on Wednesday, and then what was the second part you just mentioned? That
Once
was-
you, like, cause if I remember correctly, that was gonna be kinda like a test run to see, like, did the questions land? Were there other things that, they were like, oh no, you're off base, right? And
Yeah.
then based on that, the questions for the survey would come back here so that we could recommend it to the school committee to go
Correct.
out.
Yes,
Yes?
yes.
Okay.
When's our next meeting?
March 19th.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think last meeting we had even spoken about maybe trying to answer some of the questions. Like
Yeah, like
students and the
piloting
yeah.
Yeah.
As a teacher, I remember when I wrote questions for my students, I would try to answer them myself and see like, okay, is it a difficult question to answer? Does it need to be reworked a little bit? So I think Shivali had said, like, if you put chart paper around, student union members could try to answer questions or
Yeah.
like play around with them and like some sort of activity might help generate even more kind of feedback on them than just kind of like showing them on a piece of paper.
Right,
These are our
right.
questions so far.
Would
Does
it
that
be
make sense?
possible? Well, yeah, it does, would it be possible, would it be covered on the agenda if we could look at the questions now together as a group, or is that something
Yeah, I
we
mean, we
wanna-
have discussion for it, yeah.
Okay, do
Yep.
you mind if I put them up?
No, no.
Alright. figured while we're here, we might as well. Make it happen.
While you pull that up,
Yeah.
Sally, do you wanna give a quick update on the PD? Cause I think we didn't have that plan the last time we were in this meeting.
Yeah, so we're really excited. We have 18 different breakout session topics. And maybe I'll back up a little bit. So in the morning, on the PD day, is this what you're referring to, Jen?
Yes, yep.
Okay. From about 8 to 11 a.m., we'll begin all together as all NKSD staff from all buildings, all areas, in the NKHS auditorium, and Rob is preparing a presentation about culturally responsive practices, which is an umbrella term
Okay.
to include culturally sustaining practices, culturally relevant pedagogy, and then much more specific practices beneath that sort of umbrella topic. And so Rob, I think you'll probably spend half an hour or so presenting on that subject. And then staff will be able to go into 2 breakout sessions, about 50 minutes long each.
5-0 or 1?
5-0,
5-0, okay.
yep. In classrooms, so they'll have an opportunity in smaller group settings to learn about a topic of their choice, which again falls under that umbrella. So for example, we have implicit bias and microaggressions. We also have though practices for having a high expectations for all students, because that would be like a culturally responsive practice. And then we have topics like, let's see, I'm trying to remember all
Is
of
the
them.
homeless one, Lydia's gonna be doing something with the
Yep.
homeless population, MLL populations.
Yep.
We have things for, it covers a wide range. And I know you've gotten some feedback from teachers on that, correct?
Yes, so that's another update, is that last week we sent out an interest survey, gauging staff interest in the 18 different topics that we have for the breakout sessions. And we got a range of responses where it seems like all 18 registered some interest from staff. So we're excited. We're gonna move forward with all of them, it looks like. And then we also got some suggestions from staff for additional, one or two additional topics. Which again, I would wanna pull them up before I stated them. But yeah, so we're excited to maybe talk about planning something around these proposed topics from staff members and make it really tailored to their
Awesome,
needs.
so you're gonna incorporate the feedback into the grade?
Yes,
Okay.
we're still in that kind of,
Yep.
that stage where we're gonna use their feedback to guide the rest of the work, cause we still have some time, it's not until March 28th, so.
And one of the things, to kind of connect some of our work here, when we're doing the whole group part of it at the beginning, we will be talking about the equity vision statement and sharing that out, so that'll be kind of a way to have everybody together in the room to make sure that that is communicated out to everybody like we talked about. And yeah, I mean, I was really happy to see the responses to the survey we sent, because we were talking about what if it everybody wants to load up on one topic,
Right.
you know what I mean? But that really wasn't it. It spoke to, I think, we spread the net kind of nice and wide, because there's a lot of interest in all of them. You know, there's a good spreading of interest in the different topics. So that's good. It tells us that there's there's gonna be a lot of different options for people, you know?
Awesome.
So yeah, we're excited. I think that it's, the feedback we're getting is good, and I think that Sally kind of hit on this, the idea of giving people choice. So they know they have a voice in what we choose, and then they also have a voice in being able to pick what they are interested in. Will be good.
That's great, thank you. Okay. All right, you wanna do the questions?
So yeah, so forgive me for having it in this format. This is just how I emailed it to William. So Will had questions that he had up he had drafted for the student union, and the first one had to do with discipline. And this one I suggested just keeping as is. How can we make classroom management and/or discipline punishments at school more fair? Again, I think that's a pretty solution-based question that pretty much covers it the way we should.
Will students understand what classroom management means?
Well, and or discipline punishments. I mean,
Yeah. Well, do you know what classroom management means? Or what does it mean to you?
How the teacher manages the classroom. It'd be so
Pretty much it.
I don't know.
I almost wonder, it's fine if they get it, it's fine, but you could flip it and just say, you know, how can we make how a teacher manages a classroom? Or, you know, like, you could write it how Will said it. It's not a big deal, though. I agree with you, it's fine.
No, I hear you. It's a little, classroom management is a teacher term,
Yeah.
you know?
I would
Yeah.
just, if you just flip it, I think it's simpler.
How can we make, I can't
Like
edit
how
this.
teachers, you don't have to
Okay.
do it right now,
Alright.
but like how teachers manage. But you literally can't do it. Give
Yeah,
it
I
1
literally
minute.
can't, so, all right, so Will, can you make note of that,
Did I
maybe?
not give you evidence? I'm so sorry.
I love that for you, Will. Keep the
Thank you.
power, don't let Mr. Mezzanotte have it.
No,
Okay.
no.
Up in the right, see, where'd you go?
Yeah, there it is, all right.
If you click on that, oh no, yeah, if you, it'll pop. It's fine, though, we can
Will's
make notes
got
and
it.
follow up,
He's
yeah.
got it. So,
You should be an editor now.
okay, thank you.
Good job.
So, reload for change, okay. Hello. So we can do something around like, how can we,
How can teachers management of
Yeah.
classroom?
Yeah,
how can
better,
teachers management of
their
How do I-
classroom
Classroom.
of their classroom
and or discipline.
or discipline practices make school more fair, or
Be more fair.
be more fair?
Yeah.
How can teachers management of their classroom and or discipline be more fair? I think that gets it, right? Yeah. All right, so what I'll do is I'll copy paste now into this document, the suggestions that I drafted. This is for the second question on microaggressions. Full disclosure, I did get the help of ChatGPT with this. Just, I want to be transparent. So for microaggressions, we put what strategies or support would help you feel confident addressing a teacher or peer who exhibits a microaggression. And then we had what resources or practices could we put in place to foster open and respectful conversations about microaggressions. And then we also thought it would be good to provide a definition of microaggression.
Yeah. My only, like, quibble is with the word exhibits, like exhibits a microaggression, like, sounds,
Too nice?
Like
yes.
you don't take responsibility for
Yes,
it?
yeah, like, I think like commits a microaggression, like does it, like exhibits is kind of like, oh, like,
That's it.
yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I think that opens up a good question, around microaggressions, right? And you can correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding, I think this is important for people to understand. My understanding of a microaggression is that oftentimes they're done without any, not necessarily understanding or intending
Right.
anything.
Sometimes,
You know,
I think.
sometimes,
Yeah, I
yeah.
think it's
Other times not, but
often unconscious,
Right.
but not
Yeah.
always.
not always.
Yeah.
Nope. But often it
Yeah.
is. I think sometimes, right?
Or not
So I can
realizing
understand your
that.
point, but I also understand the softer language point too.
Right,
You know.
and that's why, like, I don't think commits is the word, but I don't think exhibits is either.
Okay.
Exhibits makes it sound like you said, like it's something that happened,
Yeah.
like, along the way.
Whoopsie daisy, there's
Yeah,
microaggression.
yeah,
Strategies or
exactly.
support would help you feel confident addressing a teacher or peer who
Shows.
Shows, yeah.
Uh,
Displays, no, like,
who
makes.
makes.
communicates a
makes.
microaggression. I don't know.
Alright, let's go on and then I'll,
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, just, I
Alright.
think the
I'll do the beep bopping and then we'll circle it.
even if it's unintentional, like the point of raising awareness about them is to draw attention to the fact that you are committing them whether you realize it or not.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yep.
Impact
Yep.
over.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah, intent,
Yep.
yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, exactly. We have to again be mindful of like the audience too, right? Is students making sure that they're,
Will,
this is gonna,
how would you say
you
it?
know,
I just looked it up, everything says commit.
But does that make sense? Would you
Yeah.
say that though? Like,
Yes.
you would say that though.
Yes.
Like if you were saying to your friend, "Oh my gosh, blah blah blah, just committed a microaggression."
Yeah.
That's not what you would say. What would you say?
I would probably say used.
That's
but-
what I was
Use,
thinking too,
yeah.
yeah.
But,
use is more
Use?
kid,
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that I
Right?
think that makes more sense. Like I know it might.
You could say used a microaggression and then even
Yeah.
put in parentheses like an example, e.g.,
yeah.
where are you really from? Or I don't know, something like.
Yeah.
Or we can do use and then in parentheses we can put intentional or otherwise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It could
Yeah.
be, it could
Yep.
not be,
Yeah.
right? Which is exactly what,
I think similar better.
Yeah,
So-
maybe before that, Shvali, like who intentionally or not,
No.
Yeah.
you know,
yeah,
displays, shows, commits,
Right.
whatever.
then it
like-
doesn't matter what that word is because you're covering.
Right.
so, I also wonder a little bit about the layering of the question. So it says, what strategies or support would help you feel confident addressing a teacher or peer who uses a microaggression? It's a fairly layered question,
Mhm.
right? And so for a large audience of, you know, school-aged kids, it just might, I'm hoping that,
It's also assuming they don't feel confident,
exactly,
and I don't love that for them.
right. And-
So
I get the intent of the question. I actually don't hate the question,
Yeah.
but it does make the assumption that they don't know, and they're usually smarter than.
Yeah,
So we can say if you see a microaggression, what would help you feel more confident
Hmm.
addressing it,
yeah.
just to make it less wordy, not wordy, but
I mean, the goal of the thing is, what do you need to
yeah.
address this, right? Are you and this isn't quite it, but like, are you able to, if somebody says, "Hey, where are you from?" to a student who might present as maybe being from somewhere else, as a person, are you going to say, "Hey, don't say that. Like, why did you ask them that question?" Or, "Hey, that wasn't nice to ask them that question." Like, that's what we're trying to figure out. Is like, what do they need to be able to do those micro interventions
Hmm.
when that happens, right? That's what we're trying to figure out.
It is what we're trying to figure out.
Because I don't know what high school kids need to do that, personally.
Correct. And I'm trying to,
They need Sherry and Matt. That's where they go now.
What would help you confront a microaggression if you witnessed it? Because I don't think anybody's like, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think anyone's like, I am 100% confident 100% of the time we're addressing 100% of microaggressions.
Yeah,
If we
because
just-
adults let
Yeah.
them go by too.
Yeah.
I
What
mean,
would help you address a microaggression when it happens?
and the other,
Like, just simple.
like I'm
Yeah.
trying to imagine in my head, like how many students really have a firm understanding of what a microaggression is?
Yeah, I think we define that, like.
So if many of them don't, which I'm thinking many of them don't, and we have to define it for them, that's good.
Mhm.
But we're asking them now to read a definition of a term, process that term, which is a complex term, and then answer it in a question about how you know what I mean? How they would,
in a scenario.
what would make them more
Yeah.
confident to deal with, it's a very, I just wonder
It could
about
get
the
really
kind of data
confusing
we're gonna
really
get from
fast.
that, you know what I mean? Cause there's a lot there that could,
I mean, go backwards then. Do you know
Yeah.
what a
Yeah.
microaggression is?
Or
How
would
do
you
you
like to
witness it?
learn about, would you like to learn what a microaggression
strategies,
is?
what they are,
Would
and
you
how to
like
address
to
them.
learn strategies
Yeah.
for addressing
Yeah.
them?
I don't,
Yeah, I
we're
like
doing
that.
it no matter what, so.
Right.
It's.
We are with the kids? I know
We
we're doing it
should.
with staff.
We should be.
Are we?
No, but like, you know what I mean? Like, what if they all say no? What does that tell us or teach us, right?
Yeah.
Like I wonder more about like what do you think a microaggression is, right? And then, like, what support would you need to feel confident like addressing it, or or do you feel confident
Do
addressing
we
it?
need the you though? Can it just be what strategies or supports would help feel confident? Would
Yes,
help.
you need the you in that.
Like if you take the you out, because it could be support for them, it could be support for someone else, it could be to go somewhere. They could suggest so many different things.
Just say, what do you do when you see a microaggression happen?
Yeah.
Just really simple.
that's not a solution-based question.
No, but you might get,
How could you address it?
I don't do anything, or I don't often feel comfortable, or I tell the social you know, the
Yeah.
school psychologist, or, cause like I'm trying to think of like what do we need from them to know how to help them? I have a pretty good understanding that high school students probably don't know how to actively correct a teacher or a peer when a microaggression happens. So
I
like,
think
why
that's
are we
right.
asking the question? We know the answer to
Right.
that part. So what we are trying to find is like, okay, what would help them do that?
What are
Right.
their ideas?
Yeah,
If we say,
So
how
just
do you
what
address a
help you?
microaggression, we might be able to take that data and be like, okay, this is what help they need, because they're going, instead of addressing it, they're,
I wonder
well,
if
what would
this,
help you?
I don't know, I just.
Sorry, as the only high schooler.
Yeah,
No, I'm just curious,
I
like, what
just-
do you think would really help?
like,
Like, what would help?
if I encountered a microaggression, from a student or a teacher, as a this is just me, I try to avoid all conflict as as much conflict as possible, so I don't call it out normally. I'll just kinda
Yeah.
sit with it, and I'll like tell my parents, but then I don't really do anything else about it, cause I try to avoid as much like drama or like conflict, but, I do think students should be more comfortable being able to address those things. So like asking what would make you feel more comfortable, like we have, but I don't like,
Just
it's
as
hard
that,
to
what would
do.
make you feel more comfortable?
yeah.
what if we had a multiple choice, some responses that they could choose from?
Yeah,
You know what I
That-
mean? Because I think that might make it a little, I think asking this open-ended is going to, I'm not sure it's gonna give us the kind of
yeah,
data we can really use well. I'm wondering if we could give them a list to choose from as a
make it more
response.
finite, so like they're not.
Like ignore, address,
Yeah.
tell counselor, to
Yeah.
like that type of thing.
Exactly,
No,
like,
but-
what, yeah, something along those lines where we could, you know, lead them a little bit, so it's not, I just think it's a lot for a lot of kids are not gonna, I think, have the
Yeah, that would be a lot to process and more.
ability to answer this well.
And that's, I like that idea, because then you can always put anything else
Yeah.
in there as an option, so then if they want to do something beyond our list, they can.
Yeah, you could give other, and then have that add something, yeah.
Are we still planning to keep teacher or peer in there?
I think so.
So, based on my daughter's personal experience with somebody when she was at the high school, they didn't really fall into that category. So, like, you've got staff, you have administrators, you could be at a sporting event, there could be another parent. So, I think that we need to either keep it very generic or broaden that to be more
We
inclusive.
could do adult,
What is good?
no, adult or
Or
peer.
peer.
Dressing in
Adult,
adult.
yeah.
Or maybe adult or student, not peer. Like peer is kind of a, like, I wouldn't say my peer and I are going to the football game this evening.
Adult or,
Student.
Are there like practices or like protocols in place if a student does experience one, who they should be going to?
There is a list of people they can go to.
Okay,
But we also kind of do, at the high school level, we do like a connection survey to make sure we actually literally go through a list of kids that they are saying there's a trusted adult, who that is, and then we hone down to the list to if a student is saying there's no trusted adult, no student, so then the school psychologist will meet them about that and try to address that.
they can also submit like a bullying or discrimination harassment complaint online on our website.
But like, are you
So-
saying like, are students told, if you experience a microaggression, here's what you should do?
I'm just curious, who is on the list? You said there,
School psychologists,
Mhm.
social worker, their guidance counselors, administrators, deans, there's a lot of
so
people.
what if somebody on
Yeah.
that list is
Is
the
ex-
person who
yeah.
committed the microaggression?
Well, then they tell me.
Yeah, tell another person on the list who's.
Yeah.
No, honestly, that's usually what happens, is that it will
Okay.
get escalated to the school committee and then, but that, even though it should not,
Yeah.
people will usually come to us and then we go backwards.
Yeah, cause that's
To
another,
the
like, it's a
superintendent
power
or
dynamic,
whatnot.
right? So like,
Right.
if your social worker is the one who is like making you, like, you're experiencing these things with, I think, I don't know, Will, correct me if I'm wrong here, I wouldn't wanna go to that guidance counselor's peer and be like, hey, you know,
Yeah.
because you feel like it's not going to be like, so I think.
I think what Will said though was really helpful for me, right? Like, so what I heard him say was that he wouldn't address he doesn't often address things like that because he wants to avoid conflict and that he's trying to avoid drama and doesn't like want to start something
Right.
that, like, it's just easier not to. And so that answer is really helpful to me to understand that because there's approaches to that, right? Of like how you could do that in a non-conflicty way that we could then provide resources for. And so I feel like if we ask them something like, what makes or would make you feel comfortable to address a microaggression? Like you'll get answers kind of like what
Yeah.
Will said, and that'll help you
I
understand
agree.
like what types of things. Because I wouldn't have gone to the conflict thing, but there's
Yeah.
so much to help like have a conversation and not have it end up in conflict. Like you ask a question instead of saying, "Hey, that was bad." You say, "Hey, can you help me understand? Why did you say that?" Right? And then like that's a really non-conflicty way to have somebody explain a microaggression to you.
And if I can just add, because I can just talk about real examples, 90% of the time when kids come to the deans about something, 90% of the time there is those two students or the two people involved in that come together at some point, and the deans or whoever is involved will help like
They'll mediate it.
so that, because you can consequence things, but then we ultimately just want the resolution, right? Like both parties are understanding what was said, how it was taken, so that it doesn't happen again. So those things happen a lot more with all the different adults.
So that would, with the scenario would be one student versus another.
It also happens with adults.
Okay, so like an adult with a student.
Because like a teacher will say something,
Yeah,
maybe not meant it, but that's how the student takes it.
Mhm.
And 90% of the time, like if they feel comfortable, they'll go to someone and say, hey, this is what happened. And we want that to be fixed, so that is most likely the most effective thing.
Mhm.
We do see like a lot of progress among students, because then they'll be like, oh, I said that, I had no idea that that's what it did.
All right, let's pick a answer. Let's pick a question and move on. But however we want to do it. But like,
Okay.
we could wordsmith it all day, but.
Yeah, okay. All right, so moving along, belonging, welcoming, so we had a edit to this, let me just copy it in. All right, so what aspects of our community make it feel welcoming to you? What changes or initiatives could enhance the sense of belonging and inclusivity in our community?
I would just say, for the first one, I would just say, where do you feel most like yourself? Or where feels the safest, or, I feel like that's like we were saying, like not like kid talk, like aspects of our community, it's just, feels very formal.
What if you just ask what would make you, I'm just saying, like, do you find your community welcoming? That's a yes, no, which is tricky. And so if they say yes, then that's it. Like, I'm trying to think of like what would make our community, like the school community, more welcoming or make you feel more like you belong.
Yeah, I'm really interested in the answers to the
Yeah.
second question, not the first as much, but both. The first will give you the positives, which is good.
Mhm.
Maybe add a question for the if yes, why do you feel that way? And then if not, what? So that there's
Like a second question is an add-on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like, do you find your community welcoming, you know, yes or no, and what changes or initiatives, you know?
When we
I-
say community, what do we mean?
I was
It's just
gonna
it's
ask
gotta be
that.
school community. I think you gotta stay narrow.
School community?
Yeah.
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 So I think we should put that
We
in.
gotta stay in our
Yeah.
scope.
So the question prior to that is more restricted to the school, but the second one is then open to larger community?
No, I think like school community and both,
both.
because.
Can
like-
we just say school?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't need community.
Yeah, we don't need to
We don't
be
need- yeah.
wordy. Well, fewer words are better.
We're getting fancy.
I think those are good questions. And then
Yeah, I like
just with
those.
school, yeah.
Yeah, and if the first question is, if they write nothing, right, that's fine.
Yeah.
And then, what changes would you like they could add there? Or if there are things, like, oh, I love that my advisory teacher, like, smiles every morning and brings us cookies. You know, like,
Yep.
like that is, things will help us understand, like, what makes them feel welcome.
Yep.
And
need
I
to
I
build
like
on
those
that.
two together.
Yep.
Like, I feel like you need both, though.
Yep.
Okay. Everybody good there?
Yep.
Yeah.
Alright, awesome, moving along.
Mm.
Alright, the next question, this is.
Looking at this one, I remember what Ms. Finkelstein said, a couple of meetings ago, where it was like, if we say like, have you ever encountered racism, it would be a ton of like experiences from students, and it could be like a lot. Why does that keep falling?
What is
It could be, it's my
Oh.
wallet, it just keeps on falling. Like, it could just be a lot for like administrators to go through and look at, so maybe we could change that, to just being like, how can we, because we know racism has been an issue that students have had, so if we know it's there, why not just address it head, like, straight on and be like, how can we, take steps or actions to address and prevent racism, ensuring a more inclusive environment for everyone?
Yeah, I like to edit on
Yeah.
that one. I think it's fine.
Do you think, well, like if you tried to answer that one in your head right now, that you,
Yeah, that's a logic.
like, would it be helpful to have like, I don't know, I'm wondering.
Yeah, it could be. I like the idea of having multiple choice, so it could kind of narrow down some things, but then having an other thing at the bottom. Because if a student comes up with another idea, they can just put it there. But for me, it's helpful to have things in front of you to like maybe think of.
Does anybody think that would be like too leading?
Yes, I like the middle, like giving examples, but not giving them multiple choice, because I think the goal is exploration here, it's not quantitative, so like, it's not like, we give you 3 ideas and the idea that gets the most votes is
Yeah.
the one we're gonna do, like, we're kind of looking to see for impact, not like them checking boxes, so I feel like I'd rather give some examples, like, you know, and then say, what ideas do you have, because I actually think they'll have thoughts and ideas about it.
So examples of steps or actions, you mean?
Yeah, like you could put like what steps or actions, training, like what, like I don't know, like whatever could we do to better address, or you could do nothing and just see what they write. Like we don't need quantity, right? One student could write an amazing idea and we're like, oh my gosh, that is a great idea, that's what we should do. It's not like we need every single student to come up with an amazing idea. But I'm curious what they think.
I think they'll have suggestions.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Should we define racism?
That's what cause
I
like,
thought-
I
thought
think
was the same thing.
it's important to like, cause there's 2 kinds, well, there's more than 2, but like, it's not just like using a racial slur, it's also like, I look around and I don't see any teachers that look like me, I don't see any, like, and that's not necessarily racism, but like,
There's an
that's
actual
structural
definition.
racism,
Like you
right?
could just
Yeah.
use the like there's an actual
Yeah.
racism definition that I think you just put, like, and that'll help, I think, because I think that's important.
Yeah.
Like,
I just feel like sometimes when you say like racism, you automatically go to like a person-to-person interaction, right? And not necessarily like structural things like within the school. And not just the school, like anywhere, like it's structural racism is everywhere, but like,
I mean, the most basic definition is the unjust treatment of people based on their race or ethnicity. Like that's the most basic version you can use. Bigger is what you're talking about when there's definitions that talk about like all the different ways. Like you could add like the longer version that talks about practices, systems, all that sort of
Right.
stuff.
I think that would be important to include, because just as you're reading that, Erin,
Yeah.
it's like based on race and ethnicity. So there could be ethnic jokes, religious jokes, but somebody might be looking at racism and tend to think of like a skin color only. So I think providing a definition would be helpful.
It's also like trick teaching. right? Like you're teaching them what microaggressions are, you're teaching them what racism is as they're taking the survey. Like that's a little micro intervention, like right there.
Mhm.
Does anybody wanna change that question?
No, but I just think like defining it so that,
Definition.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, I think that basic definition, I think probably would be good. For the purpose of what we're doing, you know?
I'm thinking back to like the email that we got, right, about the kid at the school who was like, how come none of the teachers look like me? That's because of structural racism, right? But that's not something I think that would necessarily like zing in a question that just addresses racism on a person-to-person level.
Mm-hmm.
You could do something like one of the definitions is racism is discrimination and prejudice against people based on their race or ethnicity. Racism can present in like social actions, practices, or political systems. Like that's too deep, I think. I hear what you're saying though, we can find one.
Yeah,
That,
yeah,
like,
I just, something that
is-
addresses both interpersonal and like systemic.
And we're defining these before the questions, or are we? Like racism definition before the racism question,
Mhm.
I assume, okay.
Okay, so Erin, do you mind like working on that one?
Yeah, I'm just trying to find a good one that will hit what Jen says but not be too much.
Yeah.
A mid one.
A mid one.
Yeah.
A mid definition for
Yeah.
racism is what I'm looking for.
Okay. Other than that, are we okay with this?
Yes. Until those students that will meet with physics garbage, but for now.
Okay, we good?
Yeah.
Alright.
This is the same thing, we're just like, have you experienced this, and we'd have to probably cut that out.
Okay, last question we have here. What actions or initiatives would help ensure a supportive and inclusive environment for all members of our community regardless of their gender identity or sexual orientation?
So, I see where you're going with this, but you're saying regardless of their gender identity and sexual orientation, but this question is specifically focused, like,
Yeah.
so I think what you're trying to find out here is, like, this is not a how do we make everybody feel welcome, this is how do we support members of our school community who are LGBTQ plus and who are experiencing these things, right?
Mhm.
Like, that's the way I read that.
Okay.
You could just say for, like, the members of,
Yeah, make
like,
it
the
more
members of our
targeted.
LGBT, like, for members of our, for LGBTQ members in our community.
Yeah. School community, school,
Yeah.
right? Because we
School,
changed
not-
community
yeah.
to school.
Yeah, help improve belonging for.
LGBTQ, better schools.
Or among.
Sorry, and so,
To take the
So
All the
after
way back to
four,
help.
just say members of our school's LGBTQ plus community.
Is it-
for here,
So take all off.
Yeah.
Is it possible to add like a blanket question of like, I'm still brainstorming, so bear with me, like,
LGBTQ members.
what
Okay.
makes you want to speak up about these things? Because I've done like research questionnaires like this before, and not for DEI but similar, like people will say like, oh well, if it's pink and bright, I'll go on the website and I'll click on it, but then you bring them to the website and they don't care if it's pink and bright. So like people will say, I'll do this if this happens, but in reality and in practice that's not always like how that works. So if we get like a question that's like, what makes you want to speak up for LGBTQ, what makes you want to speak up against microaggressions, we might get some answers that are like, well, this is what I think of each time, or this is what makes me want to, and that might also help us come up with more solutions as well, based on like what actually is making them do that versus what they're saying will make them.
Like, why are they doing it now?
If that
Yeah.
all
Yep,
makes
no, I-
sense, yeah.
Yeah, like, if you have taken action on any of these things, what was it that made you do it,
Yeah.
right? That's where you're going with this.
Or like what motivates
Yeah,
you,
yeah.
have to be careful with that, because it's making the assumption that something does. Right, like, that something would motivate them.
Yeah.
I think what you're saying is
Yeah.
for the people who have taken action, that's what you're trying
Yeah,
to
like
find out,
what's
right?
motivating
Right, or even if they haven't, like, people who are like very shy and very, like you were saying, like, I don't want conflict, I'm gonna like lay low, like whatever, I'm not saying that's you, but just as an example, like, there are still people who are like, yep, I super don't want to start, anything right now, but like, I still want to do, like, I still want to not let this happen, and like, what's making you not want to have that happen? And I guess part two is like, is it safe to assume that everybody has that? Or can we kind of, like you were saying, trick teaching, like, you want this.
Right,
Like,
right.
You don't want to let racism and microaggressions and homophobia and all that.
Can I ask a question about this one? If you're not a member of the LGBTQ plus community, is this a fair question for you to answer?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Really?
Yes. Because, like, you have friends, you have family members, you
Totally.
see what's going on around you, right? I mean,
But to your point, Rob, like, I think it would get too wordy, but all of these questions could kind of use the phrase, what do you think would help, you know, like, because a lot of this does ultimately end up being kind of just our opinion, right? And so,
Yeah,
like,
what
they're
ideas do you have?
possible,
What do you think?
yeah, solutions, they're not, like, hard and fast kind of, like, right answers, right? It's an open-ended question, so.
I think you can also not mandate answers,
To
right?
any of
So
them,
they
yeah.
they can leave it
Yeah.
blank, and you can say that at the beginning of a survey. Say like, this survey is to get, like, we had an equity audit. We learned about these things. We're looking, like, we know students are smart. We're looking for you all to help us think of ways to address these things. Like, give us answers if you have them, and don't give us answers if you don't. Like, it's okay. Like,
I would
don't
almost
force them.
wanna see if we could get, like, make them required questions and then just coach them to write, I'm not sure if.
Yeah, you could do that too. but-
Because,
so they don't just skip.
yeah, I fear that they would not answer any of them if you made it optional.
Yeah.
And also if like, there's one queer friend in a group and they're like, oh, I really wish I had this, and they tell their four other friends are like, well, I'm not queer, so I can't answer that, but if they all
right.
support that person, you still get those.
William, were you supposed to take these questions to the student groups?
Yeah, we talked about that before. They're going next week.
Okay,
Well,
Yeah.
to the student union, not all the student groups.
Yeah, I
Okay.
still have to talk to Victoria about, some of that, but we will definitely check it out.
okay, so it's not like a survey going out, we are collecting responses in groups?
No.
So we're collecting responses from the student union next week, and then we're creating the questions,
Okay,
and then we're sending it out as a
Okay.
survey with that
Got it.
feedback.
got it.
Is this something that's done like, would be done during the advisory period?
Probably, right? If we send surveys out during advisory mostly, right? I think so.
I don't know, we haven't talked about that, how we're doing this, we're like, we didn't have a conversation about that.
Yeah.
No,
We
we'll
did.
figure it out. You all will figure it. Like the next step is we as a group are confident in the questions. Then it goes to the school committee. If the school committee agrees that it is like something they'd like to like request the administration work on, then it will go to Dr. Dubin and the team, and they'll figure out how they want to implement it. So it's got to go.
Can you read it now? And just let me know what you think.
What actions do you think would help ensure a more supportive, inclusive environment?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What does the committee think about possibly adding as a last question, like, is there anything else you would like to say or ask?
Yeah, you
Like a
got-
very open-ended.
Yeah.
Shavali's going, no!
You could phrase it in the solution-based like realm, right? Like, do you have any other ideas or like that you want to share with the committee? Like, you could say the word like idea or something to not just have it be open-ended, but could be to be like solution focused.
Yeah, like, is there anything else you think it's important for us to know as we, you know?
I thought we went this route to avoid that
Okay.
open-endedness.
We did.
Yeah.
So I don't
Okay,
know if I feel great about it, but.
yeah. I asked as a it was a question, not a,
I also think that we shouldn't make these required responses. Because I think that, first of all, I think we're assuming that kids won't answer them, which I don't think is true.
Yeah, we got a lot of answers on
I
the
don't
one we
think
sent
that's
out that
true.
one time.
Yeah,
I
I
think some
didn't, I
kids-
didn't mean
Yeah.
to
Yeah,
say that, I don't think.
No, it's okay. I think that kids will answer, but I also think that like we shouldn't force them. I think they should choose to.
I also think when this does go out, that we should probably put something in there about like if you a contact person, so that like if they're going through this and like something is like bothering them, or like it brings up something, so that there's resources that come with the survey, right? Like, just so that we're not putting these, because some of these questions are gonna be like, yeah, and so we just don't wanna just throw them out there and be like, okay, go do math now, right?
Yeah.
Like, so like, have just a little thing like, if you wanna talk to anybody, like go see X, Y, Z.
Mhm.
So I'm curious, for students who have significant disabilities or are nonverbal, how do, I guess for now, like, how do they respond to surveys? Is there like some support? How is that done now?
My expectation would be that they would
Staff
have
help
this accessible to them
Mm-hmm.
in whatever form they needed it.
Yeah.
So, but if you're maybe somebody who is nonverbal, that for example might need like a parent to
Mhm.
assist them.
Yep.
Is that sent home? Or do the teachers just say they can't fill it out?
So
Yeah.
anytime we send out surveys, it goes, if anything goes to students, it always get copied to the parents. So they will definitely see it.
Electronically?
Yep.
Okay.
And then the nonverbal students, a lot of them in our building have their tools and devices that the TAs help them to do. Just like they would do for a lesson, survey would be no different.
Right. I would think it would be exactly whatever we do to accommodate their needs and to make learning accessible to them would be this.
Okay.
Whatever we as a school do in that respect. Like we have plans in place and personnel and things of that nature. So whatever we would do to make their learning accessible to them, the same would be done for this.
Will, do you feel good with the changes?
Yeah,
You sure?
yeah.
Okay.
I'm really confident with these, because they're a lot better, they're solution-based, and it fits, yeah.
Okay,
All right.
awesome, thank you.
So next step will be student union.
Yep.
And we can think about the format. I kinda like Shivali's idea of having like maybe a gallery walk type of thing.
Yeah, where they all answer, yeah.
We put them on posters and they can like give feedback on sticky notes or something like that.
Yeah.
or-
Can we get, the resource, like the physical resource to do that, like the sticky
We'll get 'em some
pads?
stickies.
Yeah,
Yep.
we have sticky pads.
Yep, we do. Yeah. All
He's
right,
gonna get
Is
your
that
own
happening on
post-it
the
notes, Will,
Yeah.
did you hear that?
what's that?
I said he's gonna get his own post-it notes, big day.
There you
No,
go.
we have a lot of supplies, Will,
Alright.
in the office.
Awesome,
All
thank
right.
you, everybody.
Excited.
I'm excited you're excited, Will.
Will has been very patient and working very hard on this, and I appreciate that.
It's gonna look good.
Because I think we're gonna get some good, I mean, based on the feedback that we
Adults.
always get from students, I think we're gonna get some good feedback. Okay, so the next thing to talk about is, something that had come up when we were going through the goals earlier, or when it was like the end of last year. And like things that we wanted to prioritize, and this was not on the equity audit, but we thought that it was important to do, was to talk about like doing just like a baseline on where the district is in terms of like accessibility and inclusion, and like how we can like see where we're at now and maybe like set goals for like how we could do better. Mary, you wanna take this?
Sure. I actually sent an email to everybody about an hour before the meeting. Did everybody get that? I know it was on kind of short notice.
Sure, it's in the box.
And then I just sent with that.
Sorry, Erin, it's not a
No, it's
Google document or anything.
It's okay.
Yeah.
I just
put a
did
Google
a like,
document, Mary, because I put that was all the stuff pretty much that we talked
Yeah,
about,
I
right?
got it.
And so I put that in, it's not everything, but I also
Is that
sent
what's
out,
coming up here?
I think Rob's gonna pull up your
Okay.
email. So I
Okay.
sent, after your email, I sent the Google Doc and like the
Oh.
checklist
Oh, you
that
wanna
we
see
had
the
kind
email?
of created.
Alright, I'm sorry, anytime I pull my email inbox up, I
Yeah,
Put
I'm
one
sorry,
in
it's not a nice
It's okay.
Google table.
no, that's alright, hold on just a second, I'm sorry.
Rob just doesn't wanna cast his emails.
I don't love
That's what's
casting my
happening right now.
emails,
Yeah.
it's just,
Rightfully so.
yeah.
It's enough for us to be scared by it.
So the thought was to, you know,
Oh,
make,
great, yeah.
make a recommendation, of, you know, I think what started the conversation was like looking around, like what are the things like on the walls that, you know, show like diversity, equity, and inclusion, and, you know, and then also like how, well, you go, Mary, you talk.
No, that's a great start. That's one of the launching points. Also with the discussions about the new middle school and, you know, starting off with a fresh slate, those are things that can be really done, you know, moving forward. So I would say the majority of this is based on my personal experience. And I think that's the best way to start, because with accessibility, it's generally not something that those of us who are physically capable and neurotypical tend to notice unless you're in that situation where you need to have some type of accessibility. So, so this list can certainly be, we can add to it, and I did a quick Google search and came up with that other comprehensive checklist. But the main ones are things like the doors, you know, and I'll just give you like a quick, you know, my experience with the last school my son was at was DMS, and it was one of those where you would have to get buzzed in, and somebody would unlock the door, and you'd have to get his wheelchair and all of the things, and this is something his nurse used to have to do when he would bring him to school. You'd have all that, open that up, you'd get inside, and then you'd have to buzz the next door, because I can't remember if they could open two simultaneously, but there was usually like a little bit of a pause there too. So that's what I meant by like the main entrance and having the automatic door openers. The only school I'm familiar with the elevator, again, is DMS, but to do a review, I guess, I don't know, maybe we could call this like an accessibility audit, if that's the right term, to check on, again, location, dimensions, weight capacity, mechanical reliability. Accessible parking, that's definitely something that has also come up. I think we had a discussion here about that at one of the meetings, because there was some event at one of the schools where there was like an older grandparent or family member who had to travel such a long distance in the building that I guess at one point they had to just stop because it was so far from where they could get into the building and to arrive at the event itself. And so again, I mean, I don't need to read all of this through, but bathrooms, the private area for students required continence, I think that's probably something that the district handles on a student-by-student basis. And Rob and Shivali, maybe you have more experience with this. It's my understanding that that's something done based on a student's individual needs and what's in their IEP. So if they do not need an accessible area during that school year, they don't have it. Ideally, I would love to see, there is I know somebody who she was actually on the Channel 12 News a few weeks ago, a mom who was working on something called Changing Spaces, which is
I
to
saw
have.
that, yeah.
Did you see that?
Mhm.
And
It's
using, they're like adult size changing spaces. So, you know, typically you can go into a public restroom and there's a changing area for a baby, but once your child reaches, I think it's around 30 pounds, they don't have those. And I think most of us don't wanna have to change a child or be changed on a bathroom floor. Get like overhead lighting for some kids, that the fluorescent lights can be too much.
Victoria actually did her.
I was gonna say
specific
that.
project on that, on the lighting.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she had a lot of good information, yeah.
When did they do this again?
It was democracy.
Democracy.
Oh, I would
Yeah.
love to see that.
Yeah.
Okay. And again, my experience, what they've done, at least at Hamilton, maybe at DMS, is they've had some sort of like nylon coverings over the lighting, so that may be done on an individual basis.
Mhm.
So, does anybody have questions if you wanna take a look?
No, I mean, I think it's a very good list, and I think, like, there's some things in progress, so I think, like, what, I liked your idea, Mary, of like an audit kind of document, because there's some things that are in progress in the bond, right? Like, we saw something last night about like all the different ADA upgrades that are happening at the different schools, but I think making that visible to folks is good, and then also determining areas of like next steps or things that need to be done, is really important, because I do think our director of facilities is really great about like that, but like knowing what needs to be done, I think is important beyond the list of what we already have identified, so.
Yeah, and the other thing that listed on there, but that we had talked about, was like, when you walk into a school, like, what do you see? Do you see things that look like you? Do you see all of our children? Like, do you see, like, you know, so, like, what do the schools have hanging? Like, and what are the pictures? And, you know, are we representative of everything? And, like, you had brought up, like, you know, all the presentations that had initially gone out for the new school just showed a neurotypical child, right? And so, like, you know, what is our practice as a district when we're doing photos or like social media posts, like, so, like, and I think, like, there, you had linked to the accessibility checklist there, but there was also the what was it, the governor's Commission on Disability
Yeah, I
has
was
some
just saying
things,
they
and
have
so,
stuff.
you know, just kind of get a baseline for where we are and then figure out where we wanna be, and some things would be easy and some things would be not, but we don't know what we can improve if we're not, like, taking stock of where we are.
And the reason why I added some of those to transportation, I don't know if those are like being done. Sometimes, again, in our experience, sometimes the minibuses had mechanical issues with some of the lifts. I remember a time where they went on a field trip down to Dave's to do shopping before Thanksgiving, and I got a call from the teacher that they couldn't get my son up on the bus, so I had to come get him, and I think I ended up bringing him home because it was a problem with the lift. So I'm not sure if those are inspected regularly. It's really important that they have the full length, the seat belts that go, but for somebody who is in a wheelchair, that go completely across. So again, and then, you know, I don't know if this is necessarily within our purview, but in terms of transportation for students who ride the minibuses in particular, does the district have some minimums and maximums in terms of bus rides, so that those students are not on the bus any longer than necessary?
I think these are all good questions, and I think that our transportation director would be equipped to answer them.
Okay, so I
So
guess
I
we
can
just have to
definitely-
figure out, like, how do we go about
Right.
doing this?
So I was actually working with some of the minibus drivers and aides and Michelle, Director of Transportation, today, and they really do, like, pay attention to the regulations, and we did a training today where they learned about the different chairs and how to use the tie downs most effectively, and so this stuff really matters to them, I can assure you of that. And I'd be happy to help, like, if you feel like there's something that specifically you wanna communicate to them, I'd love to help
Yeah,
do
and
that.
And I think also finding out, like, the current state of things, like what's, and get in parent input, because you're not gonna hear from a and we had mostly very positive experiences with transportation. But you're not gonna hear from the transportation folks that, you know, because of the schedules, for example, that a student may have been on the bus for a long time, and because they have to get those kids ready a little bit sooner if they take more time to get ready, and they may not have had, like, time to do a diaper change. And so, and I'm sorry, I will be, like, very transparent. There are many times my son came home and he was drenched because there wasn't supposedly enough time, and so those are the kids, you know, nobody wants to sit in a wet brief. So I think those are items that parents may not reach out to transportation. So how do you make that, the best situation? And just to ensure the dignity of all the kids. So I know they're little details, but,
No, it's not little.
Yeah, I think what I always think about, especially with the school committee, like what are, cause this advisory committee is the, like under the umbrella of the school committee, and so I was just thinking about like how the school committee can have input in this, and so part of it is things like questions that you were asking about, like policy, right? Cause that's a big piece of the school committee's work, and so taking a look at the policies that have to do with transportation or different things, and looking to see if there's any improvements in language that we can do, or any like guidance or guidelines that we could add to that, so that's definitely one area we could look at. And then also budget, right? That's the other big piece of it, is like what resources are needed to do some of these things beyond what we're already doing. And so I think it's just trying to figure out like what on here needs to be done versus is slotted already. Like, you know, like I said, there's some things that are already encumbered and already scheduled to happen this summer, and then if not, like, is it in the bond or is it not in the bond? And if it's not in the bond, then figuring out like how do we find the resources to achieve it. Like, so I think it's just kind of figuring out those pieces to figure out like how much money we would need to accomplish some of these things.
That was my first question too, is like what, cause I know the ADA upgrades is a big part of the bond,
Yeah.
you know, so like what's the crossover there? You know
I
what
would be
mean?
happy, Mary, to take your list and do a like a Excel
I already
spreadsheet,
started one.
like
I sent
audit
it out
of
to
it.
everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll own it. Especially with CLAC, I'd also be
Yeah.
happy to bring it as a cross-reference to them and ask for some of their feedback
I think
on
it's a great idea.
opportunities. So
Yeah.
happy
Yeah.
to, I'll own it.
Mhm.
the next meeting is, February 26th, I
Yeah.
believe.
Mary, thank you.
Yes.
Yep, sure.
So do we need to like motion this? What do we need to do, Erin?
I don't know if we're at the motion part, because like,
So you wanna take it to CLAC, get some feedback, and then,
I'll come back.
okay,
Yeah, so
Okay.
I'll ask the CLAC has a presenter coming that day, but I'll ask if I can get some time to get some feedback, or at least open the conversation and maybe say, you know, if you wanna share, like, things that you might not have said before because you didn't wanna complain or didn't wanna, you know,
Yeah.
like, please let us know so that we can kind of identify some areas of need. And then I can bring that back here, and then, you know, I think that's when we send up the
Okay.
motion, when it's like, we'd like, or if it goes to policy to
Yeah.
get some things to look at, et cetera. So I think
Okay.
I don't think it's motion right now,
no,
but
that's fine, I just wanna like define what the next step is,
Yeah.
yeah,
the next step is I will do some work
Okay.
and bring it back.
okay.
I think that's a great idea, Erin, to give the attendees at the meeting an opportunity to ask questions, because oftentimes when there is a presenter,
Yes.
there's very little time
Yeah.
left. And for them, because I've heard that from some people, like they want to feel as if there's room for discussion, and that's a tough one.
Yeah, one of my goals was gonna be to bring some of the policies that might need to be looked at by that group to them and showcase like, hey, these are the policies, we'd like your feedback on things that might not be in it, or things that could be in it, or things that might not be changed in it. And so that kind of goes along with that concept, because I wanna be able to give them like really constructive voice, so I will report back at our next meeting.
Okay, awesome. So then the only other things left on the agenda were to like just continue to look at our goals and figure out, out of the equity audit recommendations, like what do we want to be working to try to advance forward? Rob, can you pull up I'll ding you in the
Mhm.
file, hang on.
Someone's not thinking,
Chevalier's on
thanks,
that.
Mary, yeah, Chevalier's locked out. I think I have this, what you're referring to, Jen. Just give me a sec. Is this it?
The main file, equity, yeah, there you are, okay. So, I can't see that, my eyes are going. Okay, so the equity vision statement, we have moved that up to the school committee. The school committee has not heard it yet because we haven't had a true school committee meeting since our last DEI meeting, but so the recommendation that we made at the last meeting will be heard by the school committee Tuesday. And, and then hopefully we'll be able to move forward with, that. The, discipline data, the student voice, the PD is in process, like we've talked about, Erin, was there something else that we had addressed that we had wanted to like highlight and make sure that we were?
Yeah, give me 1 second.
Like for the student voice one, I think what we had talked about was, well, we're working on getting student input there,
I also was looking through the dialogues, like, but I don't know, the Democracy Night.
Democracy
I don't know
Night
why they
things,
call
yeah.
it anything but Democracy Night, but they have a fancier name.
Yeah.
I was looking through ones that
Dialogues.
touch dialogues and, yeah, I was looking through their list to see which ones had, like, diversity, equity, inclusion lenses on it, because like that's a piece that, like, you know, like when they keep presenting and then they every year is this, like I was trying to find ones that this group could maybe take a look at, because that's something they had voice, and so it's just kind of in the ethos. So one thing I think that we haven't quite hit on yet is like the professional development stuff beyond the March date. And so I don't know how exactly we should move that one forward, but I think we had some other like ideas on that piece, if I remember correctly.
Do you mean like what the plan is for that?
No, I'm just looking at the document.
The
I was
ideas
trying
that
to
you
look.
had initially.
Yeah.
I think, was it reviewing like the stuff that's available outside of the district?
Yeah, I mean, there's two things, and again, we don't have to do these things, I'm just trying to go back to what, like, was written at one point. So, like, providing a list of professional development activities that are attended by administrators, teachers, and students. Like, I don't think we have a good understanding of, like, the work that's actually being, like, I think there's more going on than we know about, like, as far as, like, different trainings and things that folks were going to, so kind of trying to figure out what that base is. But then also the review of professional development opportunities that might be available through MIRI or other organizations, like trying to make those more public or more known to folks. So I think those were two that we hadn't quite tackled, but that might also not be the direction that we wanna go in.
So we haven't brought to you guys any documents, tangible things that you can look at that we've been working on, but I feel like we have actually already begun both of these types of work, yeah. As far as like collecting, I mean, we have our PD day plan, but then I do have a list of MIRI type PD that we're hoping, I think basically in our minds right now, we were kind of waiting to launch the equity vision statement that morning, March 28th, and then everything would kind of follow from that, as far as like putting up a webpage potentially, and that would link to MIRI style professional development opportunities beyond the March PD day. So it kind of felt like the equity vision statement and that public launch was the starting place, but that honestly a lot of the stuff's already ready to go after that. I think. So if you guys would like us to bring some of our drafts,
Yeah, I
or
mean, we could share that. We put together, Sally's put together a list of,
asynchronous.
yeah, asynchronous, web-based,
PD.
professional development, yep, options.
Great.
I don't know.
No, that's great.
I should bring
Mhm.
anything next meeting, or
Yes.
Yeah,
yeah.
okay.
No, I think
Okay.
that's good just to get, kind of get a sense of
Right, you
what,
guys can
what
look
you're
it
working
over.
through, yeah,
Yeah.
and then you can go from there.
So one of the things on here that we had identified was greater penalties for hateful speech and behavior, and the policy advisory committee has been working on a like a hate motivated behavior policy. But I thought somebody had raised an interesting like concept about like, again, it's education and not just penalties and just like awareness, but like if we're not, like a lot of the conversations that we've had have focused on high school, but like if we're not training on all these things at the elementary school level, like by the time we get to the high school, a lot of things have already like been put in place. So how can we educate and inform, you know, to address those behaviors and why they're harmful, and, you know, kind of create an environment where, you know, we're addressing these things, we're discussing them, and we are, you know, trying to move away from, by the time they get to the high school, it's a loss, you know, there's a lot more happening. And I'm not sure what the way to do that is, whether it's through the policy, whether it's through, you know, education, and maybe that's like a question like Erin said, maybe there's stuff that's happening now and we just don't know about it, but, like what, you know, kind of focusing on, because we're gonna ask these questions and we're gonna get these suggestions, but then how are we gonna implement actual change?
Money.
But some of it isn't money, like some of it is,
No, but,
I mean, money always counts,
Yeah.
but you can do things without money.
yeah,
Mhm.
I was just thinking like, we don't have any extra money in next year's budget to address anything.
I guess where I'm going with this is like you can have conversations and those don't cost money, right? Like if we're training our teachers, that's great, but then how are we passing that through to the students? Like I'm thinking like, you know, when like a hate motivated behavior occurs, like what is the process? Cause it shouldn't just be you get a suspension or like we call your mother. Like there should be a, like this is why you shouldn't do that, right? Like,
So I will tell you, the best outcome I've seen is when a situation actually happens, which you don't want it to happen, but when it happens and when that restorative piece happens, is the best education and impact.
Yep.
That happens 95% of the time. It's very successful. So as much as you don't want certain things to happen, they're almost better when they happen, because then we have an opportunity to intervene and educate. Now, the reality is the staffing is what it is. So in the midst of when everything happens, somebody's doing that restorative along with all the other things they do, so it's chaotic. So just throwing something out there as a solution could be like a person that can be a restorative coach for intervening between student to student, adult, like anyone.
Yeah, I think students should, like, I feel like there should be an emphasis, like, if a student hears something that another student says, that student could still say something. Like, usually like, if somebody says something that's, like, really, like, just not okay, I'll usually say something to them, like, you can't really say that, but I know a lot of other students won't do that, cause they don't, like, want the conflict, or they just don't, like, see anything that wrong with it, so they just let it go. But I think there should be an emphasis on students being able to teach other students, like, that's not okay. That's not okay.
Doesn't Quid have a different curriculum than the other elementary schools for, they like
Conscious
have a
discipline.
specific thing, right?
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
conscious discipline, yeah.
So, I'm sorry, say it again.
Conscious
Oh,
discipline.
conscious
Yep.
discipline, but they're the only elementary school, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And we have, when that's been approved, we've asked, like, is that gonna go to other schools? And I know that's money, cause we have to
Yep.
pay for it, but, you know, like, to Will's point too, like, to empower the students to be able to have those conversations themselves. And, like, it's great that, like, the restorative practice is happening one-on-one, but if it's just me and Mary and nobody else knows, that's an impact for us too, which will ripple out, but it's much more meaningful if it's like a community type thing. And I know the discipline committee's been talking about like restorative practices and things like that, and, you know, we keep coming around to it, but like, I think as a district, like, to be, like, no, you can't do this, this is why you can't do it, like, and this is how we're gonna work, you know, past it. And it's great that, like, we are starting in the elementary schools at one, but it doesn't help if it's not everybody.
Yeah, and a piece that might be missing, I'm not totally sure, it's not in some buildings, is I think it's a teachable moment, right? And like there could be education around the history of the
Yes.
language.
Yeah.
And then some kind of, I think the students should potentially have to produce something to prove that they have learned. Like it could be a piece of art, it could be a written statement, or I've heard about in some districts like there being some sort of assignment attached to
Sometimes
the
we do that.
infraction, and then also a presentation of that assignment to those affected, whether it's another student, a teacher, so I don't know if we could, I mean, we may be able to create something like that for this particular topic.
Yeah, I think you're right, Sally, because it's not, punishment isn't the goal, right? It's a
Right.
learning, like, we want to teach, and just saying you did something bad, we're gonna put you in detention doesn't fix the issue, right?
Right.
And so that's the missing piece. But I don't think that we are currently equipped to have those conversations, because the teachers don't know, and like, the students don't know, so how do we get to the point where we can have those conversations?
How do school-wide or district-wide discipline practices get communicated to parents?
Handbooks?
usually. Handbooks, but we also, like, at a personal level, they always get a call about their child after the incident is being dealt with.
But before, I
Then-
had a
then
question,
that's-
like a parent say to me, somebody with a very young child, so
Yeah.
like new to the school, saying, is there something in writing? And I said, well, I'm going way back with my kiddos, but there used to be like a handbook, and then you had to sign that you had read it. So just refresh my memory, so is it a district-wide handbook that goes to all of the schools?
No.
No.
Or one for each school?
One for
Yeah.
each school, but we have district level policies that cover discipline.
And we create the handbook off of those policies.
Okay, so are those distributed at the beginning of the school year?
They're
Yeah,
all,
it's
they're all
electronic.
electronic now.
Yeah.
Everything is online?
Yeah.
Okay.
And even the sign off is online, but we also include them, at the beginning of the year, we'll include them in our like weekly letters.
So it's not on the website, it would be through an email?
No, it's on the website as
Okay.
well.
But when you
Okay.
register, like at the beginning of the year, and you have to like go through and do your medical card and things like that, you have to sign off that you've read the handbook.
Okay.
I think going back to the original thing though, Jen, and I'm here for what you were just talking about, but like the equity audit recommended greater penalties for hate speech behavior. That is not
Yeah.
teaching conscious
Yeah.
discipline to elementary students, which is also lovely, but like the actual equity audit recommendation from the company that we hired was that there should be greater penalties for that.
Yeah.
And so, not that I obviously believe really strongly in restorative justice and discipline practices, but like, that's not what they were saying to us. They were saying that we are the opposite, which is we're letting students get away with hateful speech behavior, or whomever, or staff, and that we need to work through that.
Yeah, and I think you are right. I think in my mind, I'm going, addressing it is a greater penalty than what's happening now. Like actually naming the thing that's happening, right? And saying we are having an issue with these things, instead of just letting it go by. Even if we're addressing it, you know, in a restorative way versus a punitive way, like the mere fact of addressing it head on.
And just to clarify, we do both. Like, we won't just have a restorative piece and not, the punitive is still there.
Yeah.
Right, and I think the equity audit did kind of call for both, right? Like a harsher punishment or a more severe intervention and restorative practices.
And, you know, I know I brought this up before, but like, it's not even being coded as a discipline infraction. So even if it's happening, it's not being coded that way. So that's a start in and of itself, right? Just cause we're not naming that this is a problem, we're just putting it off as insubordination, and I don't mean putting it off, but like, there is a code for hate speech, and like, we're not using it, so, even that is a struggle. So I think maybe I'm gonna suggest that everybody, you know, and then there's the other big like elephant in the room, which is the diversity of the staff, which wasn't even part of the equity audit, because this committee was supposed to be addressing it. And I think, to me, that's a high priority. And so, I know it's like a big one, but, I think we just need to decide like what area do we wanna focus on next, and then we've made strides on PD because we focused on that, and I think that's good, and just what's the next one that we think is gonna have input.
Yeah.
I have been thinking about hiring some because it's getting closer to that season. And, you know, from where I came, the building administrators sought out interview committees. They really reached out to building staff and just inquired if anybody wanted to volunteer. And they included students as well on the interview committees. And then anybody who volunteered or was elected to participate in an interview committee did have to undergo an implicit bias training prior to being involved in the process. So I would love to,
That's great.
yeah, to kind of use some of those practices in NK as well, but
You mean prior to interviewing?
yeah.
So we have to do that at my work. Like if you're gonna be
Right.
on a search committee, you have to go through a training.
Right.
It's asynchronous, like you do it online, but you have to,
So-
or you can't participate.
Not having been through the hiring season with you all in the past, I don't know how much you may already be doing or what your process looks like, but
Definitely doesn't include that. Yeah.
there are some pretty, I think, fairly low-hanging fruit type easy tweaks that we can make to definitely bring students into the interview committee, just to, you know, increase that student voice, and then some easy trainings, short trainings really, that are asynchronous online.
Curious about
The
what
Kirwan
kind of-
Institute is
Yeah.
really good.
I'm curious what kind of like actions we could take to just have more diversity in our applicant pool, you know? Because like, we can go through all the trainings we want, but if we don't have diversity in the applicant pool, you know?
And I think that goes to what we talked about before, like where are we reaching for our applicants? Like, and how are we specifically taking steps to, even if we can't get them to come in for an interview, like putting the position in front of them, right? Like, because you're right, Rob, like if we just keep posting jobs on School Spring, we're gonna get the same type of applicants that we've been getting, like, so what steps can we take to be more, you know, throwing a wider net?
I think that's what we're looking into.
So maybe that's something that we wanna talk about at the next meeting, and I think we had at one point talked about having, like, what is our practice now, like, what do we do when there is an opening, like, where are we looking? You know, analyze current practices for recruitment, onboarding, and retention, right? The other thing, that's come up before is like, we don't do an exit interview, so we don't know why people are leaving, so like, maybe just simple things like that to try to get a feel for.
Is there like any established set of relationships with schools of education in Rhode Island? What schools,
All of them. That, they mean
Salve,
it like,
Rick,
yeah,
URI,
yep.
PC.
okay. And then do we start like reaching into, I mean, not that you just have to do the adjacent states like Connecticut and Massachusetts, but are there ones that
That's a
are
great
Which does
question.
sound
further
like
away?
Connecticut,
So,
right?
yeah.
Yes.
That's a great question, yeah. When I first started here, I was really eager to like see how can we recruit more diverse candidates, and I started reaching out to definitely the institutions right around us, but I did have that question, where it's like, how far should we cast the net? What do you guys think?
Could we get I don't know if they will provide this, but could we ask the colleges, do they have stats on how many students are in those programs? And how many of do they even
That's-
have the percentage of
Yeah,
diversity,
Mhm.
right? Like,
It
do
might
we
even
work
be
going to those
public,
colleges
yeah.
that do have them? Cause that's where the problem is, right? We don't have the numbers of candidates. I don't know if they would provide that, I don't know, Erin, would like you or I
If work at a
provide that
public school, you can
information?
have anything.
Mhm.
You can have my salary, like that's on my, yeah, no, they would,
They do?
they have that, yeah.
Yeah.
The answer is that there is massive systematic, like, racism that is in play in education school systems to even get them to be in
Go to
education
college.
programs. Go to college, but even education programs, they're still using in Rhode Island, like, standardized tests as metrics to get through the different levels. Like, they're just weeding students out pretty effectively, so it's a big problem. But there are districts that have done it, and so we could be one.
Yeah, it's worth trying.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so on that note, I will pause, and at the next meeting, we'll kind of dig into this one a little bit further, and we will wait to hear back from Will on his field trip to the student union and see how that went. Erin, by then, you should have met with CLAC too, right?
Yep, so,
Okay.
yes, although I don't know how long their PD thing is gonna be, so I
Okay.
will see what I can do, but I will have something
Okay.
I will have something for that next meeting,
Okay.
no matter what.
Okay, awesome, I will make a motion to adjourn.
Somebody,
Oh,
question,
no, go ahead.
for the next meeting, that's on the 19th, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is, are we planning to bring Zapel in for that meeting?
Always down.
And I'm not even Italian.
I am always
Did you
down for
unintentionally
food.
book it on a
They
wrong
used to
day?
have, because, I used to,
Wear your red.
well, I would treat the teachers at Next Steps to Zapely.
Mhm.
And the one next to whatever the Rome Point Cafe is, that big,
Mhm.
Yeah.
they used to actually sell the half ones.
Ooh,
Mm.
I would like a whole one.
There
I
you
will
go.
commit, I will commit to bringing some. Does everybody like Zapely?
Oh, you're not joking, yes. Yes, please, Mary.
It's
I've never
like
had
a-
one.
Really?
I just
Well,
said
love cultural experience. Were they
It's like,
delicious?
it's
It sounds like
the,
we'll
I
have
think
to
the easiest way to describe it, it's almost like what a cream puff is. Do you know what a cream puff?
You're gonna love it, Will. You're gonna love it.
However, but instead of whipped cream, it's more of a, like a, they have boiled cream and like a regatta cheese
Mhm.
cream. So
Okay, now.
You
I'm
say
like-
remote the right way,
yeah,
which is
I
good.
will
Yeah.
commit to bringing them
Okay,
in.
all
Okay.
right, so on that note, do you wanna give me
I
a
will
second?
get up early and go to D. Louise in Cranston.
Oh
Yeah,
my goodness.
because
Oh
that's
my
like
gosh,
the.
you're like speaking my
That's like-
language.
I
What's
was
that?
like,
Together.
I am. Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Is that-
Oh, sorry, thank you,
Oh, do we adjourn?
Yeah.
Okay, I got it.
Oh,
You got it,
sorry.
Rob?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, everybody.
Sorry, I didn't mean to. I just was
No,
like,
no, no.
it's the 19th. We've got to.
Sally, so, did you see Erin's response?